I used to be a frequent user of a chat room in my late teens, one that was based in the area that I lived. I met loads of cool people and went to many meetup events. One evening, while chatting with the usual suspects, a new username popped in. They informed us that they were male, 19, and in a town next to ours. He seemed really cool and funny, and after seeing him in the chat room regularly for a few weeks, he PM'd me asking for contact details. He seemed cool and I thought, why not? I was recently single, and from his description of himself, I was keen to see him. We PM'd and chatted for a few weeks, just the usual teenage flirty chat. It was coming up to the rooms next week, and he was telling me how much he was looking forward to seeing me. So the day of the meet arrived. I met up with a few of the members closest to where I live, and we share a taxi to the town centre. A couple of hours in, and no sign of my new friend. I notice my phone has no signal, so I pop outside to see if I have any messages. I do. I have lots of messages. I have a picture of myself, stood with my friends from across the room. I have messaging asking why I'm being so flirty with the other people, and why I'm talking to the other men. Why aren't you looking for me? Just the same thing over and over again. I go back to the bar and show my friend the messages. Needless to say, they all think this guy's a head case. I have no idea what to respond to this guy, so I didn't. For weeks I received random pictures of myself, either with friends or walking to work. On the metro, you name it, he was there. Then I saw him. One day, sitting on a train going home from a busy day at work, I noticed a guy taking pictures of me. I knew instantly it was him. His description was actually pretty accurate. Apart from he'd knocked a good 10 years off his actual age. I made eye contact with him and he froze. As I stood to get off the train, I walked directly over to him and said, "No more," and I left. He used to pop up every now and again, random picture messages here and there. Nothing was like it was before. It's been over 4 years since my last picture. I hope he's got over whatever freaky fascination he says. So, chatroom stalker? Let's never meet again. I used to work at a small drive-thru in the coffee shop kiosk. We had a large, loyal following of customers who would come at least once a day. Most of us were young, fairly pretty women, ranges from 18 to say 30 years old. And because of the nature of our work, we were all incredibly bubbly and sweet to the customers. Male customers, however, took this the wrong way. One in particular was an old man who had been a regular customer since long before I started there. For the sake of this video, we'll just call him Bob. For the first 2 years that I worked there, he was slightly flirtatious with all of us, but nothing that hinted at anything beyond a grandfatherly kindness. He would come once a day and buy a large cup of light roast coffee, black. He'd stay and make small talk about the weather for a brief moment and then drive off to start his day. Well, all of that changed in the summer of my 3rd year. Bob started coming through the line more frequently than before, staying for longer than he ever had. He'd come through once for his coffee, then again just to chat. Myself and another co-worker were quick to set up boundaries with him, making an excuse about a need to do cleaning tasks or prep an order so that he would leave. Our manager, however, was much more of a bleeding heart. He reminded her of her dead grandfather, and they bonded over losing loved ones to breast cancer. Slowly, he started to get more personal with my manager, sometimes staying and talking with her for over half an hour if we weren't busy. I didn't think too much of it. One morning though, I was opening alone and I thought I saw what looked like his car drive by, slow down and then speed up and drive off, as I was watching the shop. On weekdays we'd open at 6 AM, which meant I needed to be there before 5:30 to get things prepped and ready. It was almost pitch dark and I'd be alone for the first hour until my manager would come in. I started to keep an eye out for his car in the morning and I noticed it at least twice a week. My manager and I traded first and second shifts very frequently, so there was no way to consistently know who would be there at 5:30 and who at 6. He must have been looking for her. After about a month of this, I mentioned this to my manager. She let out a big sigh and said she thought she was crazy and seeing things until I'd shared my concerns. We'd both seen him watching us. Creeped out, but I'm sure he was harmless. We agreed not to talk about employee hours to customers for safety reasons. A while after that, he came through when I was alone, just after open around 6:15, and started talking to me about my manager. Casually, he mentioned where her house was. My ears pricked up and I knew I had to get him out before she arrived. Luckily, one of the owners pulled up in line and I said, "Oh, the boss is here. Better get back to work," and off he drove. As soon as my manager arrived, I told her what happened. She immediately got scared and started taking him seriously as a threat. She has 4 children at home. She'd never told him where she lived, so this meant he'd followed her. He knew her kids' names from the stories she'd told him. He knew what colour her house was, she told me. We went into preservation mode, calling the owners to let them know about the situation, which they brushed off. He was a good customer, spent a few $100s a year. Surely this was my manager's fault. So she called a friend who was married to a sheriff. He put out a notice to the city police that if they should intervene if a man fitting the description and vehicle was seen in her neighbourhood. By far the scariest part was when we learned that no one by his name and description existed. He'd been a member of our coffee shop's online rewards program for years, but the name we had for him was a fake. What was the plan? After a few months of basically hiding, my manager, he stopped coming by. To my knowledge, it's been a year and a half since he's been to the coffee shop, but I wonder who he really was and what he would have done if we hadn't intervened. I believe I was about 14 at the time. It was a Saturday and I was meeting my friend to go into the town shopping. A couple of hours after shopping, we decided to leave. She lives in the opposite direction to me, so we were chatting on the other side of the road at the entrance to town, saying goodbye to each other. I didn't take much notice at the time. It's only when looking back at the situation that I noticed the man walking behind us, making direct eye contact with me. Bearing in mind we were just on the edge of town, and he was walking towards it as if he was just arriving. Anyway, we had our conversation and I said goodbye to my friend and started to walk home. It was probably around 2 PM as we'd always meet midday and only stay a couple of hours. It takes me 15 minutes to walk home from town. Halfway through my walk though, I had a bad feeling and looked behind me. This guy was walking really close to me and his face, it just looked really familiar. It didn't take me long to figure out that he was the guy I barely glanced at mid-conversation with my friend before I left, which means he would have hung around for 10 minutes waiting for us to finish our conversation and immediately followed me after I walked away. This guy had been following me for at least 10 minutes. I tore him back and carried on walking, telling myself I was paranoid, but when he ran up to me, something definitely seemed off. Now, this guy was way older than me. He put his arm around me and I thought if I gave him my number, he'd leave me alone. He didn't. I was visibly uncomfortable and I didn't know what to do. When I was nearing my house, I stopped walking because I didn't want him to know where I lived. This is when, out of nowhere, he grabbed me and forced his tongue down my throat. He was a lot stronger than me, but I managed to punch him in the chest and run away. I'm 21 now, and it still freaks me out that he saw a random girl in town and decided to follow her home. I wonder how many other girls he did this to.